arguments and disagreements. There is a stereotypical case of people from Israel who will always expect you to say yes or no, straight up. And Japanese people who will never say no to your face. It's very rude. And so if you get an Israeli and a Japanese communicating in English, they have a problem. Who will say yes and what effect will it have? All right. Anger, emotion. One of my students is doing a PhD on the expression of emotion in a bilingual family, English and Estonian. If you're cross with your children, what language do you choose to be cross in? That's important. Because remember, your first language and your first culture are the ones where you will be most direct. On the other hand, when I swear, I tend to swear in other languages because I don't feel so guilty. All right. Politeness, very importantly, different between cultures and also compliments. How do we do this? Well, the best possible way is observing people in real activity. But getting permission to observe pain patients is actually difficult. A number of my doctor friends say, look, I understand what you want to do. I don't want you recording anything in my surgery because it will interfere with communication with my patient. And you must respect that. But what you can do is to collect people's observations and memories about their pain conversations with their doctor. In other words, you ask them, and you have a questionnaire, when you last saw the doctor, did you feel you had full communication? If not, why? What were the issues which were not working, and tell me about them, all right? So that's one way to do it. You can collect and analyze pain events and pain communication from the YouTube and the internet, and if you want examples of pain communication, look at American violent movies or Hong Kong violent movies. Great deal of violence and pain. You can do role plays with your students. You're a doctor, right? I'm the patient. And see how they actually manage to discover and express pain one to the other. The medical consultation is a bit like a ritual, and there is a regular structure. Good morning, how are you? I'm okay. What have you come to see me for? Well, actually, doctor, I've got a pain in my leg. Aha, tell me about your pain. Right, have you done A, B, C, D, or E? No, right, I think you should go and see a specialist. Here is a referral, off you go, goodbye. That is a little ritual, and you can use that as a framework to explore issues of pain, to analyze, and then to interpret this in intercultural context. From the point of view of a teaching agenda, I think we have a duty to alert our students to the sorts of issues that I've talked to you about today, because pain is only the extreme example. There are many other cases of emotionally stressed communication where you need to be particularly expert, sensitive, and alert to what's going on. So we need to sensitize our students to these issues and to train them on what sort of strategies to use with someone from a different culture, remembering that they may be exhibiting taboos and practices which will stop them talking fully and frankly about pain. And then repair. What do you do to get the conversation back on track? So that we become more flexible, robust, and sensitive communicators. These ideas I've picked up from Professor Lyon. They seem to me very relevant. The just-in-time and just-in-case approaches to language learning. Because our healthcare professionals are going to be faced with many different sorts of situations, and they need to be able to find information on how to behave in a certain situation. For example, this afternoon I have a patient who is going to visit me from South America. They are a Spanish speaker, female, 45, right? Various other properties. What do I know about the things to expect from people from that culture about their medical talk? Right? Because as a practicing doctor, that's a very important series of initial understandings. It's also important for allied health, which is the term for nurses and so on, but also for patients. Patients assume you go to the doctor knows everything, I will be a passive person. And by the way, the word patient in English comes from the Latin verb pati, which means to suffer. All right? In other words, you assume the doctor will take the active role and will conduct the entire interview. We need, I think, better online guidance for healthcare professionals and patients, and how we can best neutralize the problems of pain communication, because it may well be that not only your comfort, but also your life will depend on your ability to communicate accurately about the sort of pain to a new doctor in a new country with a new language and a new cultural framework. Because behind all of this is the notion that you need to think about this. In English, we need to be not only bilingual. Can you be bilingual in English? Well, there are many sorts of English and many different adjustments you make to English in different places. But you can also be bicultural in English. In other words, using English with different emphases in different places. You know about Thailish, or the flavor of English, which is very often found in Thailand. There is Chinglish in China, and Japlish in Japan, and Honglish in Hong Kong, and Manglish in Malaysia, and Singlish in Singapore. Each has different types of cultural values which go along with the language. And so, the message goes like this. If you're talking to someone and you come across something, if you perceive it, do you know what it means? Your antenna, your aerial, should be particularly alert and flexible, and you need to postpone judgment about what you think people are saying. In other words, maybe this person is not being rude, or maybe they're not just being unhelpful. Maybe that's the way their culture encourages them to be when confronted with the doctor. It is particularly difficult for Anglos who tend to be monolinguals these days. Remember, the people who learn languages worst are English speakers. They're lazy, right? Because they don't understand what it is to see the values of another culture through the language. And therefore, it's also, I think, a great advantage of people who are self-driven learners, who know where to go, who know where to find what they need to know just in time. And so you can be bilingual and bicultural in English. Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to go back, I meant to go forward. And those are my details. If any of you have questions that you'd like to ask now, I'd be very happy to talk about these matters. If you'd like to communicate with me later, we have a project on pain language at the University of Queensland. And this is starting to become a major international question. We are running sessions at international pain conferences for medical professionals, as well as in sessions like this for applied linguists. And I have found, in retirement, quote unquote, as an applied linguist, a way to be useful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Professor, for a very, very interesting talk. So now, if anyone wants to have any questions, I'm sure Professor would love to answer them. Anyone want a microphone? Anyone have any questions? No? Yes?
Okay, thank you, Professor Rasix. Thank you. This might not be a very good question, but there is some confusion I got from your talk, so I would like to seek your clarification, if you don't mind. The first one is from your examples you gave us. I found there is this word culture is used at different levels. For example, when you mention a speaker, a multilingual speaker who can speak a lot of languages, but still sticks to his or her own mother first culture. This culture seems to refer to the national, international cultures, like big cultures, like Chinese culture, Thai culture, or Australian culture, something like that. But when in the other examples you gave, like the doctor speaks to the workman, Muslim talks to the non-Muslim. In these examples, the culture is used to refer to these more cultures, like religious cultures, professional cultures. So I am a little bit confused, because how can we address these cultures at different levels when we talk about the pains that we suffer and things like this. And so this is my first confusion. Sorry to bother you with this one. And so my next question is...
Can we have that one first?
Okay, sorry.
This is a terrific question, and it's very, very complicated. Because, as you'll see from what I was saying, the cultural issues which are relevant to talking about pain are sometimes religious issues, they're sometimes issues of values like Confucius, it's sometimes issues of interpersonal behavior, right? It's sometimes how you think you should behave in the doctor's waiting room. And so culture is, it is the term which belongs to anthropology. It's enormous. And part of the problem for a doctor and a patient is to work out which aspects of which culture are relevant to the efficient communication for medical purposes. Okay, so some of these issues will be very broad international things, Western culture, Asian culture. I don't like those terms anyway. Some of them will be quite specific about particular religious beliefs and how you should behave in a certain situation, like inshallah. And others will be perhaps quite personal. No, this person is rather shy. They don't like talking about these topics. No, or maybe they're like me. I was told by my parents that I really shouldn't talk very much about pain. It wasn't what a tough young Australian boy should do. So I am using the word culture in a very messy sense, but we need to understand that there are many subtypes which are relevant. Okay, you got another one?
Similar ones, but thank you for your clarification and things like that. And the second one is, if we treat culture in this specific way, like you say, very subtitles, so it seems to me that this is not only interpersonal. Sometimes it can be intrapersonal within one single person.
Oh yes.
For example, if I am myself, I might move around different cultures when I talk to my colleagues or teachers, when I go to see the doctor in medical issues, something like that. I might move around these kind of pains as well, right?
Yes, okay. I didn't have time to talk about intra-cultural so much, but within the individual, when I speak different languages, I am conscious that I have a different personality. And even moving between different contexts in English, I'm conscious that I behave in different ways. Now, I know some people who always seem to behave in exactly the same way. They may make no accommodation to other people, and they say, this is the way I am, take it or leave it. Right? Bad luck. But there are other people who are very sensitive and who will adapt their behavior to different contexts, different people, different moods, different topics, and so on. The doctor, in 8 minutes, has to work out where the patient is coming from in all of these areas. Some patients will catastrophize and they will exaggerate and may have something really quite unimportant. Others may have a very major problem which needs urgent surgical attention, and they will barely talk about it at all as a matter of cultural training and pride. So this is, the reason why pain is important is it does have a clear medical implication. We can check it, we can understand it, and this is a way in which medicine and language can get together in a very practical way which will make a difference to people's lives. Thank you. Well done.
Okay, thank you so much.
Gentleman over here.
Thank you. So thank you, Professor. I'm Dan from one university from Vietnam, okay? I'm very interested in your lecture about pain and ICC. You know, I hate pain when I go to doctor because I'm afraid, you know, when the doctor touch me or something, he injects me. But I want to link, you know, when the pain and ICC here. So, you know, I remember that when I got my master in one university in America. So we come from many countries, students from 12 countries. So my professor, when she entered the school, we spoke English with different, the tongue style, like Vietnamese, Chinese, or Bhutanese or something like that. But my professor, she just looked at about the lip of the mouth, the mouth here. They can say, okay, that's it. Because, you know, I myself, you know, I didn't understand my French, which English with Chinese accent. So from that point, I want to ask you, in your school, you know, like you, the professor, like the doctor, you can diagnose the international student with some pain because they enter the Australian culture. I want to ask you, when you come to the class the first time with a lot of international students, with your experience, can you tell me some problems you have? That means, how can you diagnose international student pain? And then, you know, you can teach them well. I mean, in terms of like language or culture, something. Thank you.
Okay. And again, I'm relying here on my doctor friends who've told me what it's like to talk to international students and international patients. Very often, you've got very little to go by. And even the way people dress may not be a very good indication of their cultural status. The Prime Minister of Australia once visited a Muslim school, and there was a girl there wearing a scarf, right, as is appropriate. And he said, "And when did you come to Australia?" And she said, "I was born here." In other words, the way people look, the way people dress, is only the start of a series of indications that you can use. And I think the important things are to find out basic demographic information, where people come from, but then you start trying to understand about how they personally relate to the sort of pain that they are reporting. And because pain cannot be demonstrated, you know, I mean, if I've got a cut in my finger, fine. But if there's something internal, this is extraordinarily difficult, and people have little practice in talking about pain. The author Virginia Woolf, in about 1915, had influenza. She had very bad pain. She went looking in English literature to see who had written about pain to give her some words to use to describe her feelings. And she found that there was very little. So Japanese, as I've told you, is a very rich language for words about pain. English there's a thing called the McGill Pain Questionnaire, which has a list of 78 adjectives to describe different kinds of pain. And yet, for most people, pain is something which fights against language. You know, and if you're trying to find the appropriate terms to describe it, very, very hard. How are we doing for time?
We're doing good.
We're doing good? Okay.
Thank you so much. The lecture is very, very interesting. And it's a message statement, though. I'm not sure if you could...
So where are
probably
you? I can't see you.
Here.
All right, good. Thank you.
Hopefully
right.
you could help me with this. But I would like to ask about how would you further research of pains in the classroom? When I was a PhD student, I suffered a lot of pain. I'm sure some students here actually experience the same thing.
Okay.
But I think this is a very interesting thing to do. Is it the same as emotions, or is it different to look at?
Okay, they are related because they are both internal and they require they require language to find a form of expression. Okay, there is some body language which is associated with pain. You know, if the doctor bends your leg and it hurts, you go ow. But fundamentally, you need language to talk about it. Pain in the classroom is difficult because some students, in particular some female students, will come from traditions where one does not talk about these things in front of men, or there are certain things that one does not talk about except to people of your own gender. So I think you can talk about pain in your classroom in a number of ways, but you must allow the students the chance to say, well, I prefer not to talk about it. Right? Now, particularly with physical injury, it's much easier. Or something like an appendix or tonsillitis or toothache. People have this pain, and you can explore with them how good their language resources are. Now, it's hard enough for me in English to describe my pain feelings, even after all the research I've done. But when I'm in one of the other languages that I talk, which are Russian and Polish and German and French, I find that my vocabulary is really, really struggling, because we are talking not just about the objective meaning of words, but the way in which they relate to subjective implications as well. On the other hand, this is a terrific way of pushing your students to really exploit their language and to invent ways. Now, this conference is about creativity and innovation. And what patients and doctors have to do in a pain consultation is to be creative and innovative, to use language to try and achieve a communication which will allow a good diagnosis and a good outcome. So yeah, it's a great topic, but it is very sensitive, and some of your students may quite possibly say, sorry, I don't want to go there.